The 49ers decided to part ways with Nick Sorensen as their defensive coordinator yesterday. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch will speak about that decision today. The reason I don't say that they fired Sorensen is because they want to keep him around the building, reassign him to a different role. But I think that the focus of the moment, the greatest unknown, is where will the 49ers go next with their defensive leadership? And Josina Anderson has our first clue. Josina reports this morning that the 49ers are also expected to make Robert Saleh an offer at defensive coordinator. Yes, Robert Saleh, who was the first defensive coordinator under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch from 2017 to 2020, and who did a really good job for the 49ers, who was the architect of this era of 49ers defense. His successor was DeMeco Ryans. Then there was Steve Wilks, then Sorensen. And now the 49ers are set for their third defensive coordinator in 3 years. But the big wonder is, who is it going to be? I ended last night's show saying that this is one of the most fascinating eras of the Kyle Shanahan regime. Maybe you can't call it an era because it's only going to be a few weeks, but it is a pivot point for sure. The 49ers had never before entertained the possibility of exiting their pre-existing defensive structure. They still may not be entertaining it, but there might be reason to at this point. And it'll be really interesting because if they do bring in Robert Saleh, he's obviously the original architect of what the 49ers are doing defensively, took it from the Seattle-style Pete Carroll 4-3 cover 3 defense. But even he, I think, has evolved over the years. And it was tough to tell in New York because Saleh was not the defensive coordinator in New York. He was the head coach. But Jeff Ulbrich, who's another name that we're going to be looking at for the 49ers here, Jeff Ulbrich actually varied that defense over time. There were years where they blitzed a little bit more than Saleh blitzed in San Francisco, which was not a lot at all. There was years where they blitzed less. There were years where it was a little resemblant of what the 49ers were doing. But there were also years, and this is just the natural evolution of things based on the personnel that you have. There were times where it didn't look like what the 49ers were doing. And I think that in the large picture, that's what's really important for the 49ers with this next hire. There does need to be a potential fluidity to evolve with the rest of the league. The league is starting to defeat some of these Shanahan-style offenses, or at least gain some upper advantage back against these Shanahan-style offenses, which have proliferated across the NFL through disguised, aggressive blitz strategies. You look at somebody like Brian Flores in Minnesota, they're blitzing 52% of the time, which is staggering, and you saw how much trouble the 49ers had with that scheme back in week 2 when they lost the Vikings. Last season, the 49ers blitz rate was the third lowest in football, and their blitz rate bringing 2 or more extra defenders was the absolute lowest in football. Nick Sorensen only did it 1.7% of the time. When Saleh was the defensive coordinator of the 49ers back from 2017 to 2020, he didn't blitz a lot either. But it was a little bit of a different era there. And then obviously by the 2019 season, the 49ers had a wild amount of personnel up front, so there was no reason to blitz. You could get pressure with 4, and getting pressure with 4, ultimately, no matter what the trend is in football, if you can get pressure with an elite front 4, that is going to be a ticket to big-time victories. So many Super Bowls have been won in NFL history with pressure from just the front 4. I will say, though, that Robert Saleh, in that 2020 season, and we can illustrate this visually right now. These are 49ers defensive coordinators through the years under Kyle Shanahan. Robert Saleh in that 2020 season, when he lost so much personnel, including Nick Bosa, who went down with a torn ACL in week 2 against the New York Jets, Saleh blitzed more. Saleh, 2020 and then 2021 with DeMeco Ryans, that's when the Shark Blitz with K'Wan Williams became a big thing for the 49ers. But Saleh in 2020 departed from the low blitzing strategies of 2019 when he absolutely had to, because the 49ers were personnel deficient. And the results ended up being quite good given how many injuries they did have. That's what Sorensen was incapable of doing in 2024. The 49ers, yes, they were personnel deficient. I'm not sure they were as personnel deficient as they were in 2020, but he still only blitzed that 1.7% of the time with two or more men. The blitz rate was still the third lowest in the league. And you saw a team like the Detroit Lions, who had a good offensive line in that second to last game of the season for the 49ers. They just picked Sorensen's defense apart because the 49ers were not getting pressure quickly enough. So one thing that Robert Saleh has done as the defensive coordinator of the 49ers in the past is that he has varied his looks when he's had to. And I think that was the big problem with Nick Sorensen is that, yeah, they had some good games. I think the best game, people would agree, would be the one against the Rams, right, in December 12th, Thursday Night Football. Bosa was back. Talanoa Hufanga was back. Dre Greenlaw was back for a half. And they made Matthew Stafford look absolutely silly. In fact, the 49ers probably win that game if they actually hold on to two interceptions, should be interceptions from Matthew Stafford in that game. But it's when the 49ers did not have close to a full arsenal available that they really, really suffered, and the performance just absolutely fell off a cliff, such as the final 3 games of the season when they gave up over 38 points per game. That's when Sorensen's shortcomings were truly, truly exposed. That's when it did seem that it was all too big for him. And, 49ers think Nick Sorensen's a great guy. They want to keep him in the building. He did an awesome job as the ball father, the guy in charge of the ball meetings. Those are the ones where you look at the giveaways and the takeaways from around the league. And the 49ers were the top team in turnover margin over the course of 2022 and 2023. If they can keep Sorensen on staff as they would like, maybe that could be a role that he slides back into, since the turnover differential was so atrocious for the 49ers this past season. Over the past 9 weeks, they only registered 2 takeaways, and one of them was unforced. One of them was Caleb Williams just throwing backwards for whatever reason. So there's a spot on Nick Sorensen on this staff if he wants one for the 49ers. But what they need desperately is a defensive coordinator who's able to keep the unit afloat, even when personnel is not at tip-top shape. And this past season, it was nowhere close to tip-top shape. Nick Bosa, even when he was available, was playing injured for most of the year. Same thing with Fred Warner, who was playing on a fractured ankle. They had some nice talent at the cornerback positions, but Charvarius Ward was dealing with immense personal grief following the death of his 23-month-old daughter, Amani Joy. There were real growing pains, I think, at safety, where the 49ers did not have the veteran presence of Tashawn Gibson for the first part of the year. That then he re-signed with them, but he was never a starter anymore. Plus, he's up there in age. The 49ers really wanted to go with the youth movement, and they had to go to the youth movement because Talanoa Hufanga missed the majority of the year. The defensive line missed Javon Hargrave on the inside. I mean, it was personnel-wise, it was a mess. But Nick Sorensen did not show enough to compensate. And you see a defense like Aaron Glenn's Detroit Lions defense this past Sunday night. They also were beaten up. They did get Alex Anzalone back, but still, the Lions are missing more starters than they have starters available to play on that defense. And through an ultra-aggressive blitzing strategy, Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, was able to confuse the hell out of Sam Darnold and really steal a win, a huge win for the Detroit Lions. Is that sustainable over the course of the long run to be this? They looked elite defensively, the Lions did the other night. I don't think it is sustainable over the course of the long run. I think the Lions are going to get tripped up by the lack of personnel of their defense in the playoffs, but you still need to be able to at least cross the bridge of some injury gaps. You still need to be at least able to cobble things together with your schematics, and it can't just fall off a cliff the way that it did for the 49ers this year. By the way, those of you wondering about the XY chart here, it's run defense on the X-axis, pass defense on the Y-axis. So Saleh in 2020 was able to maintain the 49ers' high level of run defense. As you can see right here, even though the pass defense obviously took a hit with the injuries to so many players, including Nick Bosa and Dee Ford, who were very instrumental in the pass rush. The problem for Nick Sorensen, and this also extends to Steve Wilks, is that the 49ers dropped off of a cliff in run defense over the past 2 years. So notice that Wilks and Sorensen are the only ones on the left side of this graph. All other defenses, including 2017 and 2018 and 2020 with all those injuries. 2021 wasn't a great defense either, but all the defenses prior to the past two seasons for the 49ers have maintained or had maintained a solid base against the run. If you cannot stop the run, you will not have any fun. And the 49ers didn't have much fun defensively this past year. I would say that 2023 wasn't very fun defensively either. That was a regression. That's why Steve Wilkes got fired. But the defense in 2024 was even worse against the run, worse overall. This was the number 26 defense by EPA per play for the 49ers. Don't listen to the people saying this was the number 8 defense. No, it wasn't. This was the number 26 defense. If you're looking at raw points and raw yardage, you're missing the boat here. You need to look at per play efficiency. 49ers sunk all the way to number 29 in run defense and number 26 in overall defense. Remember that this was the number 1 unit in the league back in 2022. These were elite defenses, 2019 and 2022. So you go from number 1 to number 10. You fire the guy who oversaw the drop to number 10. You don't like the fact that he didn't assimilate well with your own system, bringing in outside ideas. So you hire the in-house guy, Nick Sorensen, to bring the system back. And it gets even worse because Sorensen seems in over his head. And it goes down from number 10 to number 26. Number 26 was the run defense with Wilkes, moves down to number 29 out of 32 teams. That is not good enough for the 49ers, who absolutely need to stop the run, because in football, it's simple. This is how it works, especially with what the 49ers are running. And today's going to be fascinating with the press conference. It happens at 11:30 a.m., Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, because we're going to finally get to ask some questions and learn what their overarching thoughts on the future of the defense are. Are they going to stick with the wide 9? Everybody's asking about Dre Greenlaw. I say don't focus on Dre Greenlaw's future until you know what the 49ers will actually be running. I mean, there's an outsized importance placed on the linebacker position in the wide 9 because the defensive linemen are stretched further apart. There are larger gaps in between the defensive linemen. So you need really good linebackers to fill those gaps to be able to stop the run. It's the risk that you take to give your defensive ends a little bit more leeway on the sides of the field. So we're going to find out if it's still a thing that the 49ers are going to commit to, that wide 9, which they brought in 2019 with Chris Kasarik. We're going to find out what types of personnel might be important. We also might have them punt on questions like that and say, well, it's going to depend on who they bring in a defensive coordinator. But at least we should get a read on if the 49ers are zeroed in on the system and the style that they've been running since 2017, or if they're open for greater interpretation moving forward. And, when we talk about Saleh, it's really interesting because he's gotten the head coaching managerial experience in his time away from the 49ers. He obviously did a great job with San Francisco's defense. I mean, he maintained respectability even when they didn't have talent in 2017 and 2018. Then he brought them to those great heights in 2019. The question is, how has Saleh improved as a coach, as a leader, since he left the 49ers in 2020? And he went through a lot with the Jets. I mean, obviously a dysfunctional franchise, but a dysfunctional franchise with an even higher amount of drama than you normally would expect. I think that obviously reached very, very brand new heights after they brought Aaron Rodgers in. I thought that the firing of Robert Saleh so early this season was unfair, but he did have to adapt and learn new things while he was the head coach of the Jets. He's a different coach, and the 49ers can hope that he's a better coach now, even than he was before. And he obviously was good enough with the 49ers to learn a head coaching job. So the entire focus of the 49ers right now should be on evolution defensively. Even if you stick with the same fundamental defensive structure, it should be on evolution. And I think what Robert Saleh has gone through over the past few years might make him a really strong candidate to lead an evolution of the 49ers defense. I think that it might be the best of both worlds for San Francisco, and that you would have somebody who literally introduced the system, who implemented the system for you from 2017 to 2020, but who's also now gone away, seen other stuff around the league, has been an actual head coach, has learned through all the drama that he had to face in New York. Now he can come back and he can evolve his scheme to what San Francisco has now versus the context of what the rest of the league is running offensively. I think that's what makes Robert Saleh such a lot of people say it's an obvious fit for the 49ers. I do think that's what makes him an interesting fit. Now, he is doing some consulting or some advising for the Green Bay Packers, but in the National Football League, if you offer somebody a promotion, and defensive coordinator would obviously be a promotion over whatever consulting or advising role Robert Saleh has, you can poach him away. I don't even know. I don't think that his contract would have even lasted longer than this 2024 season with the Green Bay Packers, even if he did sign something. Where you can't bring a guy over unless you get the other team's permission is if it's a lateral move. And last year, the 49ers were interested in Jeff Ulbrich, who was Saleh's defensive coordinator for the Jets, but he was still under contract with the Jets. And Saleh and the Jets didn't want to give the 49ers permission for understandable reasons. The Saleh-Ulbrich defense in New York, up until this year when it was a complete mess and the defense plummeted to the bottom of the league, Ulbrich took over for Saleh as their interim head coach. But the Saleh-Ulbrich defense was a top 5 defense in New York. So it made sense that the 49ers wanted Ulbrich, and that's another name on my list of other interesting potential names for the 49ers. How about we go through those, since we have learned through Josina Anderson to the 49ers will likely offer Robert Saleh to be the defensive coordinator. Other possible names, Ulbrich, who played for the 49ers from 2000 to 2009. He's from San Jose, went to San Jose State. I think he played for the 49ers during an era that didn't feature as many wins as the eras before it in the 1990s and the era after it with Jim Harbaugh in the early 2010s. But he was a good linebacker for the 49ers over that period of time, nearly a decade, homegrown kid. And then he was on the Atlanta Falcons defensive staff as a linebackers coach and eventually a defensive coordinator. But he overlapped with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. Shanahan was with the Falcons in 15 and 16, and Ulbrich was there as well. So then Ulbrich was hired to be the defensive coordinator of the New York Jets under Robert Saleh. And all those were obviously really, really good defenses. So his ideas, I think, have melded with Robert Saleh's. He has personal relationship with Kyle Shanahan and some of the 49ers staff. And I think because of that, the 49ers really wanted him in the building last year to succeed Steve Wilks. The Wilks experiment failed, as I mentioned a few minutes earlier, because the 49ers thought they could evolve their defense with him because he'd bring in outside ideas, but the outside ideas never really melded with what the 49ers were already doing. I think they believe that somebody like Jeff Ulbrich, as evidenced by their interest in him last year, and somebody like Robert Saleh, as evidenced by what we just heard right now, the 49ers are interested in bringing him back this year. They believe that these two guys are close enough to what they're currently running, yet have been exposed enough to other stuff in the league to where they can run that successful adaptation, because you cannot just continue running the same exact stuff that was working from 2017 to 2020. Even DeMeco Ryans evolved the defense when this was the number one or number two. It was the number one unit in the league in 2022 with DeMeco Ryans right there. You could see his picture right next to Robert Saleh. So evolution is important. How you go about that evolution, though, can be tricky. The 49ers obviously really struggled under Steve Wilks. And then when they brought in Nick Sorensen to be the defensive coordinator, he obviously already was in the building, but when they moved him up to defensive coordinator, they realized that, this guy doesn't have a whole lot of experience. We better have a veteran voice in the room to help him out. That's when they also brought in Brandon Staley. But the thing with Brandon Staley is that was the outside voice that Wilks served as in 2023. He just didn't have as much power. Brandon Staley came from a 3-4 background. He was a disciple of Vic Fangio. The 49ers run a 4-3, and if they're going to be sticking with the 4-3 front, some of the names that I have listed down here, not all of them, but some of the names I have listed down here are going to make more sense for San Francisco. And again, that's why the press conference today is going to be so fascinating because we're going to see exactly how much leeway the 49ers are going to carry to change this defense, or, are they going to stay with the same fundamental principles? But if you look at the other interesting names, starting with Ulbrich, it's been a 4-3 guy. Gus Bradley, he's been a 4-3 guy. That was Indianapolis's defensive coordinator who was just let go. Those were defenses that finished in the middle of the pack with Indianapolis, and then you're going to go into the whole debate of, well, was it the personnel? Was it Gus Bradley's scheme starting to stale out? Because Gus Bradley was the original architect of the Legion of Boom in Seattle. And the way that this 49ers defense descended, Robert Saleh was with the Seahawks before San Francisco. Well, that was 2 stops before. Then he was with Jacksonville. Then he came to the 49ers, but he went to Jacksonville with Gus Bradley. So Gus Bradley, if you look at the coaching tree, is going to be the ancestor of Robert Saleh, if that makes sense, right? So you look at what Bradley did in Seattle, and then you see some of the success that he had defensively at other places. It was never as great as it was in Seattle, but he's a coach that the 49ers have been tied to, that Shanahan has actually expressed interest in the past because of the 4-3 cover 3 scheme that he did initially help pioneer, really, with the Seahawks. And that all comes from Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll talks about how that came from Monty Kiffin. It was a hybrid of stuff that Monty Kiffin used to do all the way back in Tampa Bay, because Pete Carroll, I think, was a graduate assistant for the Bucs way back in the day, I think in the late 70s. I mean, it's fascinating stuff if you delve into the history of this. Carroll actually was the defensive coordinator of the 49ers in 1995, where they ran with a Leo, that's the outside edge rusher, but they called Leo the elephant back in the day. And Charles Haley was one of the original Leos. Charles Haley, that was before Pete Carroll was there. That was obviously in the late 80s and early 90s, but that was a George Seifert defense. Pete Carroll learned from George Seifert, and Seifert was the defensive coordinator of Bill Walsh, who then became the head coach of the 49ers. So the Seattle-style defense has these roots back in the Tampa 2. It's a hybrid of the Tampa 2, and then a lot of what the 49ers used to run with their 4-3 front in the late 80s and the early 90s under George Seifert. And then it was modernized in Seattle under Pete Carroll. Gus Bradley, Dan Quinn then came in 2013. Dan Quinn is now the head coach of the Washington Commanders. I mean, football throughout its history, especially defensive football, which we're talking about right now, has constantly evolved. And then the 49ers picked up the torch of that 1990s defense combined with the Seattle-style defense and implemented it with Robert Saleh in 2017. And then to have things come full circle once again, Josina Anderson reported that they're going to offer Robert Saleh their vacant defensive coordinator position now. Anyway, Gus Bradley ties into all that because he was Seattle's defensive coordinator from 2009 to 2012. Somebody like Dennis Allen, he might tie into it as well, because Dennis Allen is an absolute 4-3 scheme guru who was the coordinator of the Saints on the defensive side of the ball under head coach Sean Payton throughout the back half of the 2010s. And the Saints saw some really good defensive finishes over that time. Allen was just fired as the head coach of the Saints, but the 49ers aren't looking for a head coach right now. They're looking for a defensive coordinator. And Allen has been a really good coordinator in a 4-3 scheme. And if you're looking for ways to modernize the blitzing, modernize the defense, I absolutely think that he would be on the candidate list for the 49ers. Then another guy who's run a lot of 4-3 scheme in his career, who's had success with it, is the recently fired head coach of the Chicago Bears. That's Matt Eberflus. Matt Eberflus, while he was the coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts, faced the 49ers in a 2021 game in the rain on Sunday Night Football, where the 49ers offense looked very flummoxed. That was one of the low points of the 49ers 2021 season. I know that it was a rain game, and I think that obviously negatively impacted the 49ers' performance in that game, but I do think that Kyle Shanahan left with a lot of respect for what Matt Eberflus was running defensively. They also faced Eberflus in the 2022 season opener. They have a history of facing this guy in rain games, I guess. This was when Eberflus was already with the Chicago Bears in 2022. He's recently fired from that job, but that was the Trey Lance season opener. Lance's first start as the QB1, right? He had gotten a couple fill-in starts in 2021, but his first start as the QB1 in 2022 came at the Bears, and the 49ers had a horrific performance offensively. So it's really hard to judge both of those given the weather, given the fact that Lance is the quarterback, and obviously Lance has not been a good quarterback in the NFL. But I do think that Kyle Shanahan did get to see some Eberflus defenses up close. That means he studied them over the course of the weeks leading into those games, maybe the entire offseason leading into the 2022 game. And I do think that he saw some stuff that he liked, and Eberflus would be a potential candidate for the 49ers. Then there's Lou Anarumo, and this is really interesting. This would mark a change, a bigger change philosophically for the 49ers defense, but it's a coordinator who's been around the league for a while, who's actually respected in league circles. The Bengals just fired him because that defense plummeted to the bottom of the league. It cost Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase their fantastic season. It's fruitless. They didn't go to the playoffs. But, up until this year, Lou Anarumo had been floated around in head coach promotion discussions because of some of the success he had in Cincinnati. I mean, the Bengals, they're notorious as a franchise that doesn't invest the full amount that can be invested in its football team. And if you're skimping somewhere, especially if you have Joe Burrow and those receivers on offense, it might be on the defensive side of the ball. So, one of the theories is that Lou Anarumo just didn't have enough to work with personnel-wise in Cincinnati, and that's why it tumbled. I mean, there's a split in Cincinnati amongst the fan base, amongst the media covering that team. Is it Lou Anarumo's fault that that defense fell off a cliff, or is it the fault of the ownership and the management that they didn't give the Bengals enough resources to work with? Anyway, he's available right now, and we're going to find out at 11:30 today what direction the 49ers are going in as far as defensive style, and if this is going to be a big departure from the past. And if it is, well, all names are on the table, and Lou Anarumo is somebody to look out for. I also included a name down here that is much less seasoned than the other potential defensive coordinators. Everybody else on this list has actual defensive coordinator experience, except for Jim Leonhard. He's only 42 years old, and we know that the 49ers have gone with young coaching talent in the past. I get it. At times it hasn't worked out, like with Nick Sorensen. But somebody like Jim Leonhard, who's the defensive backs coach right now, the Denver Broncos, and that's a defense that's been at the very top of the league this year. Really, really good pass defense. I know they have Pat Surtain. I know they've got some good talent on that unit. But Jim Leonhard, who's a former DB in his own right, who has overseen a really, really solid defense for the Broncos this year, could be one of the lesser known, lesser experienced faces who the 49ers would bring in if they really believe that and they want somebody who will run a modern defense, who might be able to push the cutting edge for San Francisco in a time where I think it's really needed to combat some of these Shanahan-style offenses. You really test their protections with higher pressure rates. Ted Nguyen of The Athletic floated the Leonhard name yesterday. Nguyen watches a lot of tape. He's really good at this stuff. He has a coaching background. And he said that an inspired hire for the 49ers would be Jim Leonhard. He's coaching in an aggressive single high system in Denver now, but has experience in split field coverages as well. So what Ted is talking about is how a defense aligns its safeties. The 49ers ran a ton of single high to begin under Robert Saleh. That's the cover 3. You bring that extra safety down into the box. Recently, they've run a lot of two-back safety or split system safety, so the safeties are further back off the line of scrimmage. I think under DeMeco Ryans, they really started diversifying this because they needed to improve the pass defense. In fact, if we look at the evolution of the 49ers defense, why don't we go about this year by year? 2019, good run defense and good pass defense. Great. 2020, pass defense starts suffering, mainly because you start losing the edge rushing presence of Nick Bosa and Dee Ford. But the run defense stays solid in 2020 because you're still running a good single high system where you get that extra defender, that extra safety in the box. 2021, the 49ers pass defense continues looking really, really good. or the 49ers run defense, I'm sorry, continues looking really, really good, but the pass defense really suffers. So what happened between 2021 and 2022 is really interesting. Ryan's first year, the pass defense is bad, below average. You can see here on the vertical axis, but it surges in 2022 to one of the best in the game. Well, first, personnel is extremely important. The 49ers signed Charvarius Ward, right? That was, remember John Lynch saying worth every penny to Charvarius Ward after the game in Carolina in 2022? Well, he meant it. Charvarius Ward was worth a heck of a lot. They needed that top corner. They got that top corner. Now they're a lot more stocked at the cornerback position, so we'll see what happens with Charvarius Ward moving forward. But that 2022 season was a big benefit of the increased talent at cornerback. But another thing that the 49ers did is they started evolving schematically. They went from a lot of the single high stuff to a lot of two split field safety sets. And I think that really helped the pass defense. I think D'Amico Ryans took the defense to version 2.0 in 2022. And that's why it got so much better, obviously in tandem with the personnel additions highlighted by Charvarius Ward in that season. In 2023, they continued running some diverse coverages with Steve Wilks in the back end, which is why the pass defense was still solid, but they really started losing steam on run defense. And, some of it had to do with personnel, but some of it had to do with scheme. And then everything just really fell off a cliff here in 2024. If your pass defense and your run defense are both below average, it's time to make a drastic move. And that's what the 49ers did, replacing Nick Sorensen. So anyway, I go back to what D'Amico Ryans had done, and I look back at what Ted Nguyen said here about Jim Leonhard. He's coaching in an aggressive single high system, which is what the 49ers had back under Robert Saleh and then early in the D'Amico Ryans tenure. And they still had it, and they still have it later on, but they diversified into split field coverages afterwards. And somebody like Leonhard would be a younger coach, fresher blood, who could actually give the 49ers a little bit of both, which I think they've been trying to look for, that kind of hybridized defense over the course of the past few years. I think that that's definitely been an emphasis from Shanahan, not only in his hiring of Steve Wilks, but also in the evolution of D'Amico Ryans. And now that they plan to offer Robert Saleh, according to Josina Anderson, I think that it remains something that the 49ers are focused on, because Robert Saleh, Ulbrich, all those guys, they have garnered more experience over their time away from the 49ers. And now the 49ers can benefit from that. But a lot of interesting names, and this probably isn't even the full extent of the list. It is just the beginning. It is maybe the cream of the crop as far as name recognition goes. And those are the names that we'll give you right now. But in a couple hours, when I go and talk to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, we might have an even broader understanding of where the 49ers want to take this defensively. All right, I'm going to open this up to a few questions. Ron asked, David, should they stop the wide nine? So much of that, I think, is personnel dependent. I think the wide nine is the most personnel dependent scheme that the 49ers run. I think that, and the NFL, let me set this straight. The NFL is a personnel dependent league. You've got to have the players. But there are some schemes, some approaches that require reliance on talent even more than others. And I think the wide nine is one of them. I think that the 49ers have had trouble the wide nine this year, especially because the linebacker position wasn't as strong as it used to be. For those who are uninitiated, if you want to know the Spark Notes, the summary of the wide nine, the defensive linemen are stretched out along the line of scrimmage. They're further apart along the line of scrimmage, so the edge rushers have better angles at the quarterback against the offensive tackles. So that means there's bigger gaps in between all the defensive linemen. That means that you're going to need real space-eating tackles, but they need to be athletic as well, because it's not just a matter of taking on the double team. It's a matter of eating that space. And you're going to need really good linebackers. We're talking great athleticism, but also sturdiness against the run, which is a hard combination to find to patrol those gaps. If you don't have that, you're going to get hit with delays. You're going to get hit with, inside zone. You're going to get hit with a lot of interior runs that gash you, that put you into bad down and distance. And then the entire reason that you have set up the wide nine, that's for better pass rushing, has been subverted because it's hard to pass rush regardless of what alignment you're in on 2nd down and 3. So this past season, some of the personnel losses have put the 49ers in extremely compromised positions with the wide nine. I don't know exactly what their plan is to replenish up front. We'll see what the future of Javon Hargrave is, for example, a defensive tackle. Dre Greenlaw is the big question mark that everybody's asking about right now, but let's just wait until we see what they're going to run, because what they set themselves up personnel-wise, that's going to determine what the best scheme is moving forward for this defense. So I can't give you a firm answer on that because, again, it is so personnel dependent and we're so early in the offseason right now. I could just illustrate the challenges and the strategy that the 49ers might take to overcome them. Mike points out, if you can't stop the run, you can't be effective pass rushing. Somebody says, Uncle David, you look tired. Get some rest. How am I supposed to get some rest? The 49ers are firing coaches, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are having their postseason press conference today. I'm here to work for you guys, not get some rest. Rest can happen in the middle of the offseason when nothing is going on. Right now, it is not time for rest. Right now, it is time for work. By the way, if you do appreciate my work ethic, since we do have a comment talking about it, make sure that you do check out the San Francisco Standard. We've got the big article right now on the tough year for the 49ers. There it is. I'm going to have Mike toss that link into the description again. It's been in the description of the past couple videos, but support the work, support my fatigue, and head over to the San Francisco Standard. You can become a member. A lot of cool perks to becoming a member. I think the top one of those perks is the ability to look through the comprehensive yearbook-style analysis of the 49ers 2024 season. That's all up there. A really tough year. The 10 exact moments when the 49ers season fell apart. There is no rest for me, as we see right here. And to support that, you can go check out the Standard. Link is in the description. We've got somebody advocating for Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator, but he's still with the Browns. So that'd be a lateral move. Now, I mean, a lot of coaching staffs might clean house this offseason. Who knows? And if that's the case, certain defensive coordinators might come available. But as of right now, my list of the top names with the most recognition, and I added Jim Leonard on there since that's not a very high recognition name. That would be a more aggressive swing on a younger guy. But the top names that should be available are listed here. Ulbrich, that's assuming the Jets hire a coach who releases him from his contract. And I would assume that that's probably going to be the case with the New York Jets. Jared Long really, really wants Saleh. Wink Martindale from Michigan. Wink Martindale, he gambles. That's a big blitzer. That would be, again, today's going to be one of the more fascinating press conferences because we're going to get an idea of what the 49ers are thinking. Is this a small philosophical shift? Is this a big philosophical shift, a medium one? I don't know what they're thinking on the defensive side of the ball. And that's what the press conference is for at 11:30. Wink Martindale would be a big departure from what the 49ers do. He was with the New York Giants last year in, I believe that was week 3 against the 49ers, Thursday night game. And he blitzed them like 88% of the time. It was the highest blitz rate that NFL Next Gen Stats had ever recorded. It was something to behold, that Wink Martindale defense against Brock Purdy. Now, it confused Purdy for about a half. He didn't have a great half, and then he roasted it in the second half. So you gain some with blitzing, you lose some with blitzing. And you have to find a way to make things as efficient as possible over the longest stretch possible. This past year, Sorensen didn't blitz a lot, and when he did blitz, it didn't work. So that's why you've got to get a good, experienced defensive coordinator, because I think pressure is necessary in this league. You're not always going to have a 2007 New York Giants style defensive line or a 2019 49ers style defensive line. You're going to have to bring some exotic pressure. And if you bring it and it doesn't work, if it gets exposed on the other end because guys have abandoned posts in coverage, well, that's even worse, right? So the DC, it's a really, really important job in this league. And this is going to be really important for the 49ers to get right. This is going to be their third defensive coordinator in 3 years, which is not ideal on the surface level. Don wants a defensive coordinator who's played before. You want that fiery energy on the sideline. Yeah, Jeff Hafley isn't getting fired in Green Bay. The Green Bay defense has actually improved over the course of the year. Hafley, former 49ers DB coach, went to Boston College to be the head coach. Now he's Green Bay's defensive coordinator. I think he's done a good job there. He's not going to be available for the 49ers. I think Richard Sherman likes his TV job right now, guys. You get paid a whole lot more on TV for working less on TV. You could be with your family. I think TV is the natural course for most who have the choice. Like it's tougher. There's fewer TV jobs than there are coaching jobs. Unless you're a glutton for punishment, it is not easy to be a coach in the NFL, though. Long, long hours. You sleep on the couch. It is a grind, and then you're fired just like that. I mean, the standard for performance is extremely high. So I don't think that Richard Sherman is throwing his name into the ring here. Come to eat at Sundance Steakhouse. Heck yeah. I love Sundance. Sundance is cool in Palo Alto. I'll be there soon. Leave me a comment in the comment section. Tell me when to come by, and I will be happy to. KJ says that Saleh will be offered and turn it down because he is being interviewed for head coaching positions. I don't know if he's going to get any, but Jacksonville is interviewing Saleh. Ulbrich might go with Saleh. Obviously, Jeff Ulbrich was Saleh's defensive coordinator. So KJ thinks the 49ers' best shot is Gus Bradley because it's his and Dan Quinn's defense from Seattle that we run. So this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Gus Bradley, 2009 to 2012, Seattle's DC. Dan Quinn came in 2013. Saleh was an assistant under Quinn in that 13 season. Then Saleh went with or followed Bradley a year later to Jacksonville. And Saleh, so, I mean, all these guys have worked together, right, when we're talking about the Seattle-style scheme. And then Saleh came to the 49ers in 2017. But Saleh also hired Jeff Ulbrich, who might follow him to Jacksonville if he gets that job. So right now it's the musical chairs phase, and we don't know exactly who's going to end up where. And there's a lot of things upstream of the 49ers, such as a head coaching interview for Robert Saleh, that are going to impact what might happen with the 49ers defensive coordinator position. If Saleh gets offered a head coaching job, he'd obviously take that over 49ers DC, which is why I list all of these different possibilities for San Francisco. All right, guys, everybody, thanks for the questions. This has been fun. The report says that the 49ers will offer Robert Saleh to be their defensive coordinator. That's from Josina Anderson. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch will talk at 11:30 today. So that means I've got to head down to Santa Clara. Check out the San Francisco Standard. Sign up for a membership. It's all available for you right here. Just go to this link and it's in the description. You'll be able to read all the good stuff about the 49ers. And I have a lot more good stuff coming out because now we finally get to hear from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch in postseason mode. So they will have answers to our questions. See you on the other side.